In the beginning, God created the whole world and he put people in it. And he said, you rule over the world, but remember, I'm in charge. So the people ruled over the world and said, okay, you're in charge, God. Thank you. But pretty soon people started to ignore God. They forgot he was in charge, and eventually the world became so violent, God was sorry he made the world. So he wiped it all out with a flood. But he rescued one man and his family who acted like God was in charge, and they said thank you to God. But pretty soon people started to ignore God again, until eventually God chose one man, and God said to that man, I will be your God, and you and your family will be my children. Come out from your people and go to the land I tell you. God made 3 promises to that man. He said, I will give you so many children, you'll become a great nation. I will give you a land full of good food, and I will bless you so that through you everyone on earth will be blessed. God also said, but your family won't always remember that I'm in charge. They will ignore me and end up as slaves in another country. But I will not forget them, and I will always remember them, and I will always rescue them. God made those same 3 promises to that man's son and grandson, and that man and his family said, we're glad you're in charge, God. Thank you. But just like God said, pretty soon God's children started to ignore God. And just like God said, they ended up as slaves in another country. But God did not forget them. He remembered his promise, and he sent a man to rescue his children and bring them back to him. And the people said, we're glad you're in charge, God. Thank you. But then God's children started to ignore God again. So God sent judges to rescue his people and remind his people that God was in charge. And the people said, we're glad you're in charge, God. Thank you. But then they started to ignore God again. In fact, they said, we don't want you in charge. We want a king. So God gave them kings to remind them that God was in charge. And the people said, thank you to God. But then they started to ignore God again. In fact, even the kings ignored God, and eventually they walked away from God completely. They ended up being taken away to another country. But God did not forget his people. He remembered his promise to them, and he sent special messengers, prophets, to remind them, God is in charge. Say sorry and stop ignoring him. They said other things like, God has not forgotten you. In fact, one day he will send a special rescuer to rescue you forever. And not just you, but everyone on earth. But the people didn't understand. Eventually, God's children returned to their home country, but it wasn't the same. Enemies took over and ruled their country, and the people said, where's this special rescuer that was supposed to save us? Then one night a star shone brightly in the sky and a baby boy was born. The boy grew up and did amazing things like heal sick people and make blind people see. And he told the people, God is in charge, say sorry and stop ignoring him. He also said, God wants everyone to be a part of his family. And that made the people pretty angry, so they killed him. But after 3 days he came back to life and said, remember God promised he would send a special rescuer? That's me. Remember how God promised he would bless you, and so through you all people on earth can be blessed? That's happening now. Anyone who says sorry for ignoring God and says, you're in charge, God, thank you, can be a part of God's family. Anyone on earth. Now, your job is to go and tell everyone the good news. God has a big house and he wants all his children to come live with him. Tell everyone.